The stepmother sold the house after the death of her millionaire husband, and then kicked out her pregnant daughter. Before we begin, take a moment and share where you're tuning in from. We would love to hear from you, so let us know in the comments. Now, let's embark on this journey together. Evelyn Cole stood at the edge of the driveway, her hand clutching the railing, her gaze fixed on the mansion that had once been her home. The grand estate, with its towering stone walls and sprawling gardens, now felt like a prison that had once been filled with laughter, warmth, and the promise of a secure future. But all that was gone now. The laughter had faded. The promise had vanished. Her father, William Cole, had passed away suddenly, leaving behind a fortune built over decades. Evelyn had been the apple of his eye, and he had always promised that his wealth would secure her future. But promises, as she would soon learn, were easily broken. Her stepmother, Olivia Cole, was standing at the door of the mansion, watching her with an unreadable expression. She hadn't even bothered to meet her halfway. No hug, no sympathy, just cold indifference. Evelyn could feel the weight of Olivia's gaze like an anchor pulling her down. "Evelyn, we need to talk," Olivia called out, her voice tight with something Evelyn couldn't quite place. It wasn't anger, nor was it concern. It was more like a warning, a quiet storm brewing just beneath the surface. Evelyn hesitated. She didn't want to go inside, not anymore. This house, this place, had once felt like a sanctuary, but now it felt alien. It felt like a place of betrayal. "I've made the decision to sell the house," Olivia continued, stepping onto the porch. Her heels clicked sharply on the stone, steps a sound that made Evelyn flinch. "What?" Evelyn's voice trembled. She had to have heard wrong. This house? Her father's legacy. How could she? How could Olivia even think of selling it? "It's time, Evelyn," Olivia said, her voice too calm, too cold. "You know that your father left a lot of debts. There's no other way." Evelyn blinked, her mind racing. Debts? Her father had been a millionaire. What debts could possibly be so large that they would require selling the mansion? The more she tried to make sense of it, the more everything slipped through her fingers. Her father's death had been sudden, but it hadn't been this sudden. Something didn't add up. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. She was suffocating. This house, these walls, these memories, everything was slipping away from her. Was her whole life built on a lie? "You can't be serious," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm afraid I am," Olivia replied flatly, turning her back to Evelyn and walking back inside. "I'll have the papers for you to sign by tomorrow. It's for the best, Evelyn, trust me." Olivia had never trusted her. Evelyn had known that for years. But this was different. She wasn't just taking away Evelyn's home, she was taking away everything. Evelyn stood frozen for a moment, her hand still gripping the cold metal railing as if it could hold her together. She wanted to scream, to confront Olivia, but what would that accomplish? Nothing. Olivia had already made her decision. And Evelyn had nothing left. No one. With a heavy heart, she turned away from the mansion, feeling the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. There was no going back now. As she walked down the driveway, her thoughts spun wildly. Where could she go? What could she do? She was alone. No one to turn to. No family left except for Olivia. And Olivia was no family at all. Her mind kept returning to the same question. Why? But no answers came. Only silence. And that silence spoke louder than any words ever could. Evelyn didn't know where she was going. She just walked, step after step, until the mansion was nothing but a distant blur behind her. The streets of Haven Brook, once unfamiliar, to her, were now her only refuge. She hadn't intended to leave, she hadn't planned on it, but there was no other choice. Not with Olivia's cold dismissal hanging in the air like an oppressive fog. Her fingers grazed her phone as she thought about calling someone. Anyone. A friend, a family member, someone who could offer solace, some shred of comfort. But the contacts on her phone felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. There was no one left to turn to. As she walked past the quiet shops of Havenbrook, she spotted a small, modest cafe. It was a place she had passed by countless times during her visits, but today, it felt like the only spot in the world where she might find some peace. The old wooden sign creaked in the breeze, and inside, the warmth of the dimly lit room promised temporary relief. Pushing the door open, she stepped inside, the bell above it chiming softly. The atmosphere was cozy, with dark wood tables and a few patrons scattered throughout. The barista behind the counter gave her a friendly smile, but Evelyn couldn't bring herself to smile back. She nodded stiffly and ordered a coffee, taking a seat by the window. Her thoughts churned, and for a while, the silence of the cafe wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. But even in the quiet, she couldn't escape the knot in her stomach. Olivia's words echoed in her mind. "It's for the best, Evelyn." But for whom? Certainly not for her. Her hands shook slightly as she brought the mug to her lips. The warm liquid burned her throat, but it did little to quell the cold emptiness gnawing at her heart. As she sat there, trying to gather the pieces of her broken world, the door opened again, and a man walked in. He was tall, sharply dressed, with a confident air about him. He looked vaguely familiar, someone from her past, perhaps. But before she could place him, he approached the counter, ordering a coffee with a low, authoritative voice. Evelyn's attention drifted back to the window, her thoughts consumed by the mess her life had become. She didn't notice when the man took a seat at the table beside hers until he cleared his throat and spoke. "Excuse me, Miss Cole," he said, his voice carrying an unsettling familiarity. "I couldn't help but notice you. You're Evelyn Cole, right?" She turned, startled. Her heart skipped a beat. He knew her name, but she didn't recognize him at all. She looked him up and down, trying to place his face. "I'm sorry. I'm Gregory Hale," he interrupted smoothly, flashing a charming smile. "You might remember me from a few years ago. I used to work with your father." Evelyn blinked, her mind racing. Gregory Hale. The name struck her like a blow. He had been a frequent guest at their home during her childhood, a business associate of her father's, and a man who always seemed to know exactly what to say to make her father smile. She frowned. "What do you want?" Gregory tilted his head, seemingly unbothered by her cold tone. "What I want is simple, really. I wanted to make sure you're all right. Your father's passing, well, it was sudden, wasn't it?" Evelyn narrowed her eyes. She didn't trust him. There was something about him that felt off. Too smooth. Too controlled. "I'm fine," she said curtly, her hand gripping the edge of her coffee cup as if she could hold herself together with it. "I don't need anyone's sympathy." Gregory's smile never wavered, but his eyes darkened ever, so slightly. "I wasn't offering sympathy, Evelyn. I was offering help. You're in a difficult spot, I can see that, if you ever need someone to talk to. Or perhaps if you need guidance in navigating the affairs your father left behind. I'm your man." Evelyn's stomach churned. "I don't need your help," she said through gritted teeth. "I know exactly what's going on." Gregory raised an eyebrow, his tone almost mocking. "Do you? I'm afraid you may be mistaken about a few things." The words hit her like a cold wave. What was he insinuating? What did he know that she didn't? "I don't have time for games," Evelyn snapped, standing up abruptly. "I don't need anyone telling me what I do or don't know." Gregory remained seated, his expression unchanged. "Of course. But I'll leave you with this thought. Sometimes, Evelyn, the truth is not always what it seems. And sometimes, a little help from the right people can go a long way." Evelyn felt a wave of nausea. She knew exactly what he was suggesting. She was being manipulated. She had to get out of there, fast. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving Gregory's words to linger in the air behind her. She didn't know what to make of him, but one thing was certain. Gregory Hale was not a man to be trusted, but what was his game? And why had he approached her now? She didn't know yet, but Evelyn knew she'd have to find out. And soon. As she stepped back into the cold streets of Havenbrook, she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Gregory's cryptic words echoed in her mind as she walked the streets of Havenbrook, her heart pounding with a mix of confusion and anger. What did he mean by, "The truth is not always what it seems"? Was he hinting at something? Was there something she didn't know about her father's death, or worse, about the way Olivia had handled everything since? Her head was spinning. She needed answers, but she wasn't sure where to start. She could barely even trust herself anymore. Her life had always been built on certainty, on the assurance that the wealth and stability her father had provided would protect her forever. Now it felt like that foundation had crumbled into dust. She stopped outside a small park, breathing in the crisp air, trying to calm her nerves. As the breeze rustled the leaves around her, she noticed a small cafe in the distance. It was a cozy place, one she'd passed a few times, but never had the chance to enter. The simple wooden sign above the door read, "Lena's Cafe." Maybe it would be a good place to think. Evelyn pushed the door open, the bell above chiming softly as she stepped inside. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and pastries filled the air, and she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. It was a quiet, welcoming place, a far cry from the coldness of her mansion or the imposing presence of Gregory Hale. Behind the counter, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes looked up and smiled warmly. "Can I help you, dear?" Evelyn hesitated. I just need a coffee," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't know why she was here. She wasn't hungry or thirsty. She just needed a moment to breathe. The woman nodded, preparing her order. "It's a tough world out there, isn't it?" Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. How did this stranger know? "You could say that," Evelyn replied, her voice thick with emotion. She didn't know why she felt so drawn to this woman, but there was something comforting in the woman's presence. Something that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, everything wasn't entirely lost. The woman placed a steaming mug in front of her. "Sometimes it helps to talk. My name's Lena, by the way. You can call me if you need someone to listen." Evelyn took a deep breath, her gaze falling to the coffee in her hands. She wasn't sure why, but something in Lena's offer made her want to open up. Maybe it was the kindness in her eyes. Maybe it was the desperate need to make sense of the chaos in her life. "I'm Evelyn." "Evelyn Cole," she said, her voice soft. "My father passed away and now everything's falling apart. My stepmother, she sold our family's mansion without even telling me. And now there's someone, Gregory Hale. He keeps showing up and he's saying things that don't make sense." Lena's expression softened, her gaze steady and understanding. "I know what it's like to lose someone close, and I know how difficult it can be when people start treating you like you don't matter, like they have some right to control your life." Evelyn looked up, her eyes meeting Lena's. "You understand?" "I do," Lena said gently. "And I'm sorry you're going through this, Evelyn. But I've learned something in my years. There's always more to the story than what people show you. Sometimes it takes finding out what's really going on before you can move forward." Evelyn nodded slowly, her heart aching with the weight of Lena's words. She had to know what was going on. She had to understand what Gregory meant when he said the truth is not always what it seems. Do you think there's more to my father's death than I know?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think my stepmother, Olivia, could have hidden something from me?" Lena didn't respond immediately. She simply looked at Evelyn with a knowing gaze, as if weighing her words carefully. "I think," Lena said slowly, "that there's a lot more at play here than you realize, and I think you need to find out the truth, for your peace of mind, and for your future." Evelyn's mind raced. She had to uncover the truth. She had to understand why Olivia had sold the mansion so quickly, why Gregory was suddenly inserting himself into her life, and why everything felt so wrong. But how could she even begin to untangle the web of lies that had been woven around her? Lena leaned forward, her voice lowering as if sharing a secret. "I know someone who can help you. Someone who understands the business side of things. Someone who can help you find answers. His name is Nathaniel Ward. He's an attorney, but not just any attorney. He's someone who knows how to dig deep. Evelyn felt a glimmer of hope, something she hadn't felt in days. Do you think he could help me? Lena smiled faintly. I don't just think it, I know it. Evelyn felt a rush of emotion wash over her, relief, uncertainty, and something else, something deeper that she couldn't quite name. She had to make a decision. If she was going to find out what had really happened, she couldn't wait any longer. She had to act. She had to trust someone, even if it was risky. I'll meet him, Evelyn said quietly, making up her mind. Thank you, Lena. Lena gave her a reassuring nod. It's what friends are for. As Evelyn stepped out of Lena's cafe, a newfound determination coursed through her veins. She had a plan. She had a lead. And she wasn't going to let Olivia, Gregory, or anyone else control her life anymore. The morning after her meeting with Lena, Evelyn found herself standing outside a small office building in downtown Havenbrook. The sign above the door read, Ward & Associates in bold black letters. She hadn't expected to feel this nervous, but as she reached for the door handle, her stomach twisted in knots. This was the first step toward uncovering the truth about her father's death. And her life now. What if the answers she sought were darker than she could imagine? Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open, the soft chime of a bell announcing her presence. The receptionist, a young woman with dark hair tied in a neat bun, smiled at her politely. Good morning, Miss Cole. How can I help you? I'm here to see Mr. Nathaniel Ward, Evelyn replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The receptionist's eyes flickered with a knowing glance. Of course. Please have a seat. He'll be with you shortly. Evelyn sat down in the plush leather chair across from the receptionist, her fingers drumming nervously on her lap. As she waited, her mind wandered back to Lena's words. He's someone who knows how to dig deep. Evelyn had no idea what Nathaniel Ward would uncover, but she had to hope it would bring her closer to the answers she desperately needed. Moments later, the door to the office opened, and a tall man stepped through. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he wore a sharp suit that seemed to fit him perfectly. His presence was commanding but not overbearing, and there was something about his gaze that immediately put Evelyn on edge. His eyes were intense, yet held a sense of warmth that made her trust him. Evelyn Cole? He asked, his voice calm but firm. She stood up, extending her hand. Yes, I'm Evelyn. Nathaniel's handshake was firm, but there was a subtle kindness in the way he held her hand, as if he understood the weight she was carrying. Please, come in. Let's talk. He gestured for her to enter the office, and she followed him, into the space which was lined with bookshelves filled with legal volumes. The office was clean, minimalist, almost too pristine for someone whose job it was to dig into the dirt of other people's lives. He motioned to the chair in front of his desk, and Evelyn sat down. She felt a strange sense of urgency building. Inside her, this was it, the moment that could change everything. So, Nathaniel began, sitting down across from her. What brings you here today, Evelyn? She hesitated for a moment, then said the words she had been rehearsing in her mind. I need your help. My father died recently, and things aren't adding up. My stepmother, Olivia. She sold our family's mansion almost immediately after his death. And there's someone, Gregory Hale, who's been showing up, saying things that don't make sense. I need to understand what happened. Nathaniel listened carefully, his eyes narrowing slightly as she spoke. Gregory Hale, he muttered under his breath. That's a name I know well. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. You know him? I've had dealings with him in the past, Nathaniel said, leaning back in his chair. Hale is a man who doesn't take no for an answer, and he's tied to a lot of unsavory business. If he's involved in your father's affairs, it's a problem. Evelyn's mind raced. She had suspected that there was something off about Gregory, but hearing it confirmed by Nathaniel made her stomach churn. Do you think he had something to do with my father's death? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel paused for a moment, his gaze never leaving hers. I don't know yet, but if you're serious about getting answers, I'll help you. We'll need to go through your father's financial records, and I'll need you to trust me." Evelyn nodded, her heart swelling with relief. She didn't know what Nathaniel would find, but this was the first step toward reclaiming her life, toward finding the truth. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice steady now. "I just need to know what happened." Nathaniel stood up and walked over to a filing cabinet. He pulled out a thick folder and handed it to her. "This is your father's last will and testament. I'll go over it with you, but I want to warn you. Sometimes these things don't go the way we hope." Evelyn took the folder, her fingers trembling as she opened it. The will was dated just a few months before her father's death. As she skimmed through it, she came across something that made her heart stop. Olivia was named as the executor of the estate. But there, in the fine print, was a clause that she had never seen before. It stated that if Evelyn was ever deemed unfit to manage the estate, Olivia had the authority to sell all of their properties and assets, including the mansion. Her mind raced as she tried to piece the information together. Had Olivia planned this from the beginning? Was the sale of the mansion part of some larger scheme? Evelyn looked up at Nathaniel, her face pale. This clause. It says that Olivia could sell everything if I was deemed unfit. But I never knew about this. My father never told me about it." Nathaniel's expression softened. "It's possible your father didn't want you to know. Some families have secrets they keep, Evelyn. But this is concerning." Evelyn felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "I need to know more. I need to know if Olivia had anything to do with my father's death." Nathaniel nodded solemnly. "I'll start digging, but I need you to stay vigilant, Evelyn. You don't know what you're up against." Evelyn left the office later that day, her mind swirling with the new revelations. It wasn't just about the mansion. It wasn't just about Olivia. There were deeper, darker currents running beneath the surface of everything she thought she knew. As she walked back to her apartment, she couldn't help but wonder, how far would Olivia go to keep her secrets hidden? The days after her meeting with Nathaniel felt like they stretched on endlessly. Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about the will, about the clause that gave Olivia the right to sell everything if she was deemed unfit. That tiny line, buried in the fine print, had opened a floodgate of questions she couldn't ignore. Had her father truly intended for Olivia to have that much control? Or was something more sinister at play? She couldn't shake the feeling that Olivia had known about the clause all along. The sale of the mansion, her cold behavior, her quick decisions, it all pointed to something Evelyn wasn't ready to face. Evelyn's thoughts swirled like a storm as she sat at her kitchen table, sipping a cup of tea. Her apartment was quiet, far too quiet, and the walls seemed to close in on her. The loneliness that had accompanied her since her father's death was suffocating. She had always relied on him, on the security of her family's wealth, but now it felt like she was adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, her heart skipping a beat. It was Nathaniel. "Hello?" She answered quickly, her voice tight. "Evelyn, I've got some news." Nathaniel's voice came through the line, calm but with an edge of urgency. "I need you to meet me, now." Her pulse quickened. "What's going on?" "It's about your father's business dealings," he said, his tone serious. "I've uncovered something that could change everything." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "What is it? What did you find?" Nathaniel hesitated before speaking again. "I think your father was involved in some risky investments, ones that went sour, and I think Olivia knew about them. She may have been the one pushing your father to make those investments in the first place." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "What?" "But my father was a smart businessman. He didn't take risks like that. He always knew exactly what he was doing." "I know it's hard to believe," Nathaniel said, his voice softer now. "But the records I've found tell a different story. There were debts, secret loans, deals that went bad. And I think Olivia played a part in hiding it from you." Evelyn's mind reeled as she absorbed this new information. Her father, a man she had always seen as invincible, had been hiding something from her all along. Olivia, too. Her mother had always been distant. But this was something entirely different. Had Olivia pushed her father into these risky investments for a reason? Was it possible she had been trying to secure her own future at the expense of Evelyn's? "I'll meet you," Evelyn said, her voice shaky but determined. "Where are you?" "At the cafe we met before," Nathaniel replied. "I'll explain everything when you get here. It's important." The weight of what he had said hung heavily in the air as Evelyn put down her phone and stood up. She had to know the truth. She couldn't back down now. Evelyn arrived at the cafe within the hour, her heart pounding in her chest. As she stepped inside, she immediately spotted Nathaniel sitting at a table in the back corner. He looked up as she approached, his expression grim. "Sit down, Evelyn," he said, his voice low. "I've found something that's going to change the way you see everything." Evelyn slid into the seat across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "What did you find?" she asked, barely able to keep the panic out of her voice. Nathaniel slid a file across the table toward her. "Take a look at this." Evelyn opened the file carefully, her eyes scanning the documents inside. There were financial statements, loan agreements, and a series of transactions that seemed suspicious. Large amounts of money moving between accounts, some labeled simply investment, with no further details. "What is all this?" Evelyn asked, her voice shaky. Nathaniel leaned in, his eyes intense. "These are your father's financial records. It looks like he was laundering money through several different companies. Some of these companies are connected to Gregory Hale. It's not clear exactly what was going on, but it's obvious that your father was involved in something illegal." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. "No, this can't be true. My father, he would never." "I know this is hard to hear," Nathaniel said gently, "but the evidence is here. I've been digging for days, and everything points to one thing. Your father was in too deep, and I think Olivia knew about it. She might have been covering for him." Evelyn's hands trembled as she flipped through the documents. She couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. Her father, a man who had built an empire, who had always seemed so sure of himself, was involved in something criminal? And Olivia, her stepmother, had been hiding it from her this whole time. "This doesn't make sense," Evelyn whispered. "Why would Olivia let my father do this? Why would she let it go on?" Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "That's the million-dollar question, but I think I have an answer. I believe Olivia wasn't just your father's wife. I think she was part of it all along." Evelyn looked up sharply. "What are you saying?" "I think Olivia and Gregory Hale were working together," Nathaniel said, his voice low. "I think they were using your father's name and wealth to cover up their own shady dealings. And I think your father found out. That's why he died so suddenly." Evelyn felt her world shatter around her. The man she had trusted, the man she had adored as her father, had been caught in a web of lies and deceit. And Olivia had been a part of it. She stood up, the file still in her hands. "I need to confront her. I need to know the truth. I need to hear it from her." Nathaniel stood up too, his hand gently resting on her arm. "Evelyn, you have to be careful. You don't know how deep this goes. Gregory Hale is not a man to be taken lightly. And Olivia, she's playing a game you don't fully understand." Evelyn pulled her arm away, her resolve hardening. "I don't care, I need to know. I need to know what happened to my father." The drive to Olivia's house was a blur. Evelyn's mind was consumed with a single thought. I need answers. She hadn't told Nathaniel her plans. She knew he'd try to talk her out of it, try to convince her that confronting Olivia wasn't a good idea. But Evelyn wasn't about to wait around for someone else to find the truth. She couldn't sit idly by, not with the web of lies and betrayal growing tighter around her. She arrived at Olivia's house just before dusk, the darkening sky casting a shadow over the large, cold mansion. It looked like the house had always looked, imposing and immaculate, but tonight it felt different. It felt like a place full of secrets, full of things Evelyn wasn't ready to confront. Her heart raced in her chest as she parked her car in the driveway. She hesitated for just a moment, her hand gripping the steering wheel. Could she really do this? Could she stand face to face with the woman who had been a mother figure to her for so long and demand the truth? Taking a deep breath, Evelyn opened the door and stepped out into the cool evening air. The front door was unlocked. Olivia had probably been expecting her, though Evelyn hadn't told her she was coming. She could already hear the faint sound of footsteps on the marble floors as she entered the foyer. "Evelyn," Olivia's voice rang out sharply, and Evelyn could sense the coldness that always lingered between them. "I thought we'd already discussed everything. Why are you here?" Evelyn swallowed the lump in her throat, trying to summon the courage she needed. "I know about the will, Olivia," she said, her voice unwavering. "And I know about the financial dealings, about the debts my father had, about you and Gregory Hale." Olivia's expression didn't change at first. She simply stood there, arms crossed over her chest, her eyes narrowing. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice icy. "Your father was a complicated man. He made his choices, and I did what I had to do to protect us." "Protect us?" Evelyn's voice cracked with disbelief. "You didn't protect us, Olivia. You betrayed us. You let my father get involved with Gregory Hale and all those shady investments. You sold everything, the house, the land, all of it, without telling me a single thing." A flicker of something dark passed across Olivia's face, but it was gone too quickly for Evelyn to decipher. "You don't understand, Evelyn," Olivia said, her voice low and almost pleading. "You don't know what your father was involved in. You don't know what he was trying to protect you from." Evelyn took a step closer, her fists clenching at her sides. "Then tell me, Olivia. Tell me what he was trying to protect me from." Olivia's face softened, but there was a tension in her eyes that Evelyn had never seen before. For a moment, Evelyn thought she might break, that Olivia might tell her the truth. But instead, Olivia took a step back, her eyes darting around, as though searching for the right words. "He was involved in things that you were too young to understand," Olivia said slowly, her voice trembling just slightly. "There were deals, dangerous people involved. Gregory Hale was just one of them. But there were others, people who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted." Evelyn's heart thudded painfully in her chest. "What kind of people?" she demanded. "And what does that have to do with my father's death?" Olivia hesitated. "Your father, he wasn't just building an empire, Evelyn. He was trying to protect you, protect us from a much bigger mess. But he didn't tell you everything because he wanted to shield you from the danger." "Danger? Olivia, this is insane. My father was a millionaire. He was never scared of anything." "That's where you're wrong," Olivia said, her voice rising with frustration. "He was terrified, and so was I. But when I saw how things were spiraling out of control, I had to make decisions. Hard decisions." She paused, her eyes dropping to the ground as if she couldn't bear to meet Evelyn's gaze. "I made the decision to sell the house to protect you. To protect myself, to protect us." Evelyn's mind was reeling. What was Olivia saying? That her father's death had been a result of these so-called dangerous people? That Olivia had been involved in something much darker than she had ever imagined? She shook her head, struggling to process everything. "But why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me help?" Olivia finally looked up at her, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and bitterness. "I couldn't, because you were too young, because you wouldn't have understood. You were a child, Evelyn. You didn't see the signs, and neither did I, not until it was too late." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "Until it was too late? What does that even mean, Olivia?" Before Olivia could respond, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted their conversation. Both women froze, their gazes shifting. "To the window?" Evelyn's heart skipped a beat when she saw the familiar black car, Gregory Hale's car. "No," Evelyn whispered, her voice filled with dread. "He's here." Olivia's face paled. "Evelyn, please, you need to leave, now. This is bigger than you think. This is dangerous." But Evelyn couldn't move. The fear in Olivia's voice only made her more determined to confront Gregory, to finally get the answers she needed. She wasn't leaving until she had the truth, even if it meant facing Gregory Hale himself. The sound of Gregory Hale's car door slamming shut echoed through the quiet of the night, and Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. The last time she'd seen Gregory, he had been nothing but a smooth-talking businessman with a sinister edge. But now, after everything she had uncovered, about the debts, the shady deals, her father's involvement with him, Evelyn was no longer afraid to confront him. She couldn't back down, not now. Olivia's face had gone white. She stood frozen by the window, watching as Gregory approached the front door. Evelyn could feel the tension building between them, thick and palpable. Olivia's usual composure was cracking, revealing a woman who was just as terrified of Gregory as Evelyn had been all along. "You need to leave," Olivia repeated, her voice more desperate now as she reached for Evelyn's arm. "I'm telling you, you don't know what you're up against." But Evelyn pulled her arm away, her eyes locked on the door. "I'm not running, Olivia," she said firmly, her voice filled with a mix of fear and resolve. "It's time to face this. I'm not going to keep running from the truth." Before Olivia could protest further, the front door opened and Gregory Hale walked in. He was dressed in his usual immaculate suit, exuding the same air of confidence he always carried with him. But this time Evelyn could see it, the slight flicker of tension in his eyes. The man was used to controlling situations, not having them slip from his grasp. "Ah, Evelyn," Gregory said smoothly, his voice warm and inviting, but there was something cold behind it. "I was wondering when you'd come by." Evelyn stood, her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of everything she had learned, the debts, the lies, the betrayal. And yet there was still one thing she couldn't quite grasp. Why? Why had Olivia and Gregory been so desperate to keep her in the dark? "I don't want any more lies, Gregory," Evelyn said, her voice steady. "I know about the debts, the investments, everything. I know my father was involved in shady business dealings, and I know you're part of it. I want to know the truth. What really happened to my father?" Gregory's smile didn't falter, but the brief flash of discomfort in his eyes told Evelyn everything she needed to know. He wasn't as untouchable as he appeared. "Evelyn, you're mistaken," Gregory said, stepping closer to her, his tone almost patronizing. "Your father was a smart businessman, but he wasn't infallible. He got in over his head, and I just helped him out of a few tight spots. That's all." "That's all?" Evelyn echoed, her voice rising with disbelief. "You helped him. You took advantage of him, Gregory. You've been manipulating him and my mother for years, haven't you? That's why you're here, to make sure I don't find out the truth." Gregory's smile faltered for just a moment, and that crack in his perfect facade was all Evelyn needed to see. "You really don't understand, do you?" he said, his voice dropping to a colder tone. "Your father wasn't some innocent businessman. He was involved in things that you couldn't possibly comprehend, things that would have destroyed everything he worked for." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. Gregory took another step forward, his eyes narrowing. "I mean that your father made decisions, hard decisions, and those decisions involved people you don't want to know. If he had been smart, he would have gotten out before it was too late. But he didn't, and now the consequences are here." Evelyn felt the weight of his words pressing down on her, and for a moment, she wasn't sure if she could keep standing. The idea that her father had been involved in something so dangerous was almost too much to bear. "But why keep me in the dark?" Evelyn demanded. "Why sell the mansion? Why make me think everything was fine when it wasn't? What was the point of all of this, if not to protect your own interests?" Gregory sighed, as though he were explaining something to a child. "Because, Evelyn, your father's death wasn't just an accident. It was a message, and you—" He paused, looking at her with something that almost resembled pity. "You're in the way now. You've been asking too many questions, digging too deep." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean, in the way? What are you planning to do with me?" Gregory's eyes flashed with something dark and dangerous, but his voice remained calm. What needs to be done? Before Evelyn could react, Olivia stepped forward, her hands shaking. Gregory, don't. You promised. Her voice broke off, and Evelyn could see the terror in her stepmother's eyes. The woman who had been so cold and distant, the woman who had always kept her at arm's length, was now terrified of the man standing in front of them. Gregory ignored her, keeping his focus on Evelyn. Your father may have been foolish, but I'm not. If you don't stop asking questions, if you keep digging, you'll regret it. The words hung heavy in the air, and Evelyn realized just how deep this web of lies, threats, and deception went. She wasn't just dealing with a business partner or a manipulative stepmother. She was up against people who had killed for power, who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Evelyn stepped back, her heart racing, but she wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not when she was so close to the truth. I'm not afraid of you, Gregory, she said, her voice steady despite the fear churning inside her. I'm going to find out what really happened to my father, and I will make sure you pay for what you've done. Gregory laughed softly, his eyes glinting with malice. We'll see about that, Evelyn. As he turned to leave, Evelyn stood her ground. She wasn't going to back down, not now. Not when the truth was so close. But as the door slammed behind him, she couldn't help but feel that the worst was yet to come. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Gregory's cold, menacing smile and heard the words he had spoken. You're in the way now. You've been asking too many questions. The weight of his threat lingered in the air, heavier than any physical burden she'd ever carried. She knew things had crossed a line tonight. She had uncovered secrets that were far darker than she could have imagined, and now the people responsible for those secrets knew she was onto them. Her phone buzzed early the next morning, startling her out of a restless half-sleep. She glanced at the screen, her heart sinking when she saw Nathaniel's name. Evelyn, he said urgently before she could even greet him. You need to be careful. Gregory Hale isn't just some businessman. He's involved with people who will stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. I've been doing some digging, and I think we're dealing with something much bigger than we anticipated. Evelyn sat up straight, her mind instantly alert. What do you mean, much bigger? I've found links to international investments, money laundering, things that go far beyond your father's estate, Nathaniel explained quickly. Gregory and Olivia are just the tip of the iceberg. There are other players involved. Dangerous. People who can't afford to have anyone like you getting in their way. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Money laundering? Her father involved in something illegal that big? She shook her head, trying to wrap her mind around it. It didn't make sense. But maybe that's what he was trying to protect me from, she thought, bitterly. Maybe her father had been trying to shield her from the very danger she now found herself entangled in. What should I do? Evelyn's voice was shaky, but she was trying to keep the panic at bay. How do I stop this? You need to get out of town. Lay low for a while, Nathaniel advised. I'll keep looking into this from my side, but if Gregory or anyone else finds out you're still poking around, you're in real danger. No. Evelyn's response was immediate, sharp. I'm not going anywhere. I need to know what happened to my father. And I need to stop Olivia and Gregory before they hurt anyone else. They can't get away with this. Evelyn, please listen to me. This is too big. They'll come after you. You're walking into the lion's den. I don't care, she replied, her voice filled with steely determination. I'm not running anymore. I'm done being afraid. Nathaniel sighed, clearly frustrated but understanding. All right, just promise me you'll be careful. You're not in this alone. All right? I'll do everything I can to help. Evelyn hung up the phone, her mind already racing. Lay low. She couldn't, not when everything was so close. There was only one person who knew more about Gregory and Olivia's dealings, and that was Lena, the woman who had offered her support from the very beginning. She had to meet Lena again, figure out what else she knew, and find out if there were any more leads she could follow to expose Gregory and Olivia's web of lies. By the time Evelyn arrived at Lena's cafe that afternoon, she was tense. Her nerves on edge. She felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Lena greeted her with a warm smile, but even she could see the storm raging inside Evelyn. "Sit down, dear. You look like you've seen a ghost," Lena remarked kindly. Her eyes filled with concern as Evelyn took a seat across from her. "I need your help," Evelyn said urgently, her voice trembling. "I need to know everything you know about Gregory, Hale, about Olivia, about what's really going on." Lena's expression softened and she leaned in. "Evelyn, I've been trying to warn you. You're dealing with dangerous people. Gregory Hale isn't someone you can just confront. Olivia's involvement in all of this, it goes deeper than you think." Evelyn clenched her fists, trying to hold back the wave of fear. "I don't care how deep it goes. I need to know what happened to my father. I need to understand why Olivia sold everything so quickly, why Gregory was involved, and what it all has to do with these shady investments. I need the truth." Lena sighed heavily, her eyes flickering to the door as if making sure no one was listening. Then, in a soft voice, she said, "All right. I'll tell you what I know. But you need to promise me something, Evelyn. Promise me. You'll be careful. Promise me you won't push too far too fast." "I'll be careful," Evelyn replied firmly. "But I need to know." Lena nodded slowly, her face clouded with worry. "Gregory Hale. He's not just a businessman, he's a fixer. He handles problems. And Olivia's been in this for years, much longer than you think. Your father, bless his heart, was always in over his head, especially with these international investments. There's more money hidden in offshore accounts than anyone realizes, and your father was trying to clean up the mess before it destroyed everything. But Gregory and Olivia, they were taking advantage of him, manipulating him. And when your father started catching on, that's when things got dangerous." Evelyn felt her breath catch in her throat. "But why didn't he tell me?" "Your father was a proud man," Lena said softly, her eyes filled with sympathy. "And he didn't want to drag you into his problems. He thought he could fix it on his own. But it's too late for that now." Evelyn felt a heavy weight settle over her. This wasn't just about a house or money anymore. It was about her father's legacy, about the life he had tried to protect her from. But now, that very life was in danger, and it was up to her to "Stop it. I'm going to find those offshore accounts," Evelyn said, her voice hard with resolve. "I'm going to expose Gregory and Olivia, and I'm going to make sure they pay for what they did to my father." Lena's face softened, and she reached out, placing a hand over Evelyn's. "Be careful, my dear. There are forces at work here that even I don't fully understand. You may be the last person standing in their way." Evelyn couldn't shake the weight of Lena's words as she walked back to her apartment that evening. "There are forces at work here that even I don't fully understand." The thought gnawed at her. How much deeper did this conspiracy go? How far would Olivia and Gregory go to protect their secrets? And what was her father really trying to shield her from before he died? The night was quiet as she walked, the only sound the rhythmic click of her shoes against the pavement. She didn't want to go back to her apartment. It felt too empty, too hollow, but there was nowhere else to go. She was alone in this fight, and she had to keep pushing forward. As she reached the door to her building, her phone buzzed again, and she froze. It was a message from Nathaniel. "Evelyn, be careful. I've found something, but it's more dangerous than I thought. Meet me at the office tomorrow." Her pulse quickened. Nathaniel had found something important. She knew it had to be related to Gregory and Olivia, maybe even her father's involvement in everything. Without thinking twice, Evelyn responded, "I'll be there, first thing tomorrow." She put her phone away and made her way up to her apartment. The night felt oppressive, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. But there was no time to dwell on the fear. Tomorrow she would meet Nathaniel, and finally maybe she would get the answers she'd been desperately searching for. The next morning, Evelyn walked into Nathaniel's office with a sense of determination that hadn't been there the day before. His receptionist waved her in without a word, and as soon as she entered the office, Nathaniel stood up from his desk, his face tense. "Evelyn," he said urgently, gesturing for her to sit. "I've been going over the documents and I've Found something that connects Gregory Hale to a shell corporation, one that's been funneling money from your father's investments overseas. It's bad, Evelyn. Real bad. Her heart skipped a beat. What does that mean exactly? How does Gregory fit into this? Nathaniel sat down across from her, pushing a set of papers toward her. The Shell Corporation is registered in a name. That isn't Gregory's, but it's clear he's been using it to hide illegal transactions. And here's the kicker. Olivia is listed as the beneficiary of the accounts tied to it. If I'm right, she's been laundering money for years, and Gregory has been helping her. Evelyn's stomach turned. Olivia, my stepmother. She felt sick at the thought, but she's never mentioned anything like that. How could she be involved in something like this? Nathaniel sighed, rubbing his temples. That's the thing. She's been hiding behind your father's name for years, keeping up the facade of the perfect wife. But she's been working with Gregory, running these illegal investments to cover up the money laundering. Your father probably knew something was wrong, and that's why he tried to get out. But by then, they had him cornered. When he tried to confront them, they made. Sure, he didn't live to tell the tale. Evelyn's mind raced. Everything she had believed about her family, her life, was a lie. Olivia, the woman who had raised her, had been behind it all. Gregory, the smooth-talking businessman, had been her partner in crime. But why kill my father? Evelyn whispered, her voice hoarse with emotion. Why not just let him walk away? Nathaniel's expression darkened. Because your father knew too much, and he was trying to protect you, Evelyn. He was going to expose them. They couldn't afford that, so they killed him to silence him. Evelyn recoiled, the truth hitting her like a punch to the gut. Her father hadn't died because of some sudden illness, some unexpected heart attack. He had been murdered. And it was all tied to the empire her father had built, the empire that now lay in ruins because of Olivia and Gregory. She stood up suddenly, the chair scraping sharply against the floor. I have to stop them. I have to make them pay for what they did. Nathaniel grabbed her arm gently, his grip firm but not forceful. Evelyn, wait. You can't just go rushing in there. These people, Gregory, Olivia, they'll do anything to protect themselves. You need to be smart about this. I don't care, she snapped, pulling her arm free. They killed my father. They've ruined everything. And I'm not going to sit by while they get away with it. Nathaniel's face softened. He could see the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had kept her going through all of this. I understand, Evelyn, but you need a plan. You can't confront them without knowing everything first. You have to make sure you have the upper hand. Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She knew Nathaniel was right. She couldn't just go barging into Gregory's office or Olivia's mansion without a plan. But she couldn't just wait either. She had to act, and she had to act fast. I'll do it your way, Evelyn said, her voice quieter now, but still full of determination. But I'm not backing down. I'm going to expose them, Nathaniel. I'll bring everything they've done to light. Nathaniel nodded, but there was a worry in his eyes. I'll help you, Evelyn, but promise me you'll be careful. The deeper you dig, the more dangerous it gets. I promise, she said, her voice steady, though doubt lingered in the back of her mind. She didn't know what she was up against, but she knew she couldn't stop until she had the truth, no matter the cost. As Evelyn left Nathaniel's office, she felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. The closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. But one thing was clear. Olivia and Gregory were running out of time. Soon, everything would be exposed, and when that moment came, there would be no turning back. Evelyn didn't waste any time. As soon as she left Nathaniel's office, she felt the urgency pressing down on her like a heavy weight. Every moment that passed felt like one step closer to Gregory and Olivia, silencing her forever. But she wasn't afraid anymore. If anything, the fear had transformed into something far more powerful. Rage. She was angry. Angry at the lies. Angry at the betrayal. Angry at everything her family had become. Her father had died because of people like Gregory and Olivia, and now she was determined to make sure they paid for it. She sat down at her apartment's small kitchen table. The files Nathaniel had given her spread out in front of her. The documents on Gregory's shell corporations, the illegal transactions, the accounts with Olivia's name. All the pieces of the puzzle that she now needed to put together. The more she examined the records, the more her mind whirled. The numbers, the dates, everything was linked in a way that made her head spin. And yet somewhere in the back of her mind, something didn't sit right. There was one name that kept surfacing: Aldrich Stone. He was listed as one of the investors behind Gregory's shell companies, and while Evelyn had heard the name in passing before, she hadn't thought much of it. But now, something about it seemed important. She needed to learn more about him. She needed to know who he was and what part he played in all of this. She grabbed her phone and began searching. The name popped up immediately. Aldrich Stone was a wealthy businessman, but what intrigued her more was the connection to a series of international properties that he owned. Properties that had been bought through the same shell companies Gregory was involved with. Evelyn felt a knot form in her stomach. This was bigger than she thought. Aldrich Stone wasn't just another investor. He was connected to the same underworld that Gregory and Olivia were part of. And this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about power. She sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of the situation settle over her like a cloud. If she was going to expose Gregory and Olivia, she needed to go deeper. She needed to find out how Aldrich Stone was connected to them, and what kind of influence he had in the web of corruption that seemed to stretch out farther than she could see. That evening, Evelyn drove to the address listed for Aldrich Stone's company. The building was tall and imposing, with dark-tinted windows that seemed to stare back at her like silent sentinels. She parked her car across the street and took a moment to gather her thoughts. This wasn't just another confrontation. She was walking into the lion's den. She wasn't going to back down. Not now. With a deep breath, Evelyn stepped out of the car and crossed the street, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. She walked up to the front doors of Stone Enterprises, her heart racing. Inside, the lobby was sleek and modern, the polished marble floors gleaming under the bright lights. The receptionist behind the desk barely glanced at her as she walked up. "I'm here to see Mr. Aldrich Stone," Evelyn said, her voice calm but firm. The receptionist looked up, her eyes scanning Evelyn for a moment before she picked up the phone. Evelyn felt her nerves tighten, but she stood tall, unwilling to let her fear show. She had come too far to turn back now. "Mr. Stone is in a meeting right now, but I can schedule an appointment for you," the receptionist said. Evelyn wasn't here to make an appointment. She wasn't going to wait around. "Tell him it's urgent," she said, her voice low but commanding. "Tell him it's about Gregory Hale." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded and picked up the phone. After a few minutes, she hung up and looked at Evelyn. "Mr. Stone will see you now." Evelyn nodded, her breath shallow as she followed the receptionist to the elevator. The doors opened, and she stepped inside, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What would Aldrich Stone say? Would he admit to his involvement? Or would he try to spin another lie, another attempt to cover up the truth? The elevator doors opened, and Evelyn followed the receptionist down a long, glass-walled hallway. At the end, a large office door stood open. Inside, a tall man in his 50s sat behind an imposing desk. His hair was silver, his suit impeccably tailored, and his gaze sharp. He didn't look up as Evelyn entered, but he didn't need to. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke her. "Miss Cole," Aldrich Stone said, his voice calm. But there was a sharpness to it that sent a shiver down Evelyn's spine. "What can I do for you?" Evelyn took a deep breath, walking toward the desk. She wasn't here to be intimidated. She was here to get answers. "I know about your connections with Gregory Hale and Olivia Cole," Evelyn said, her voice unwavering. "I know about the money laundering, the shell companies, and the illegal investments, and I want to know what part you play in all of this." Aldrich Stone looked up at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching uncomfortably between them. Finally, Aldrich leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of his lips. "You're a very brave woman, Evelyn, but you're asking questions that no one should be asking." I don't care, she said, her voice cold. I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth. What happened to my father? Why did he die? And why did you all cover it up? Aldrich's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a thin smile. You have no idea what you're up against, do you? He asked softly. Evelyn's heart hammered in her chest, but she refused to back down. She had come too far to let him intimidate her now. No, she said, her voice steady. But I'm about to find out. Evelyn stood her ground, eyes locked on Aldrich Stone, trying not to show the fear gnawing at her insides. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. She had no idea what Aldrich was capable of, but she wasn't about to back down. Not when the truth was so close. Aldrich's smile deepened, though it wasn't friendly. You think you're in control. Here, don't you? You think you can just waltz into my office, throw around accusations, and expect answers? He leaned forward, his eyes piercing. You have no idea how dangerous this game is, Evelyn. I'm not afraid of you, she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor inside her chest. I'm here for the truth. I'm here because I know you were involved in my father's death, and I'm not leaving until you tell me everything. For a moment, Aldrich said nothing. He just stared at her, his cold eyes assessing her every move. It was like a battle of wills, each of them trying to figure out who would blink first. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. You think I killed your father? You think I'm the mastermind behind all of this? He chuckled, a dark, hollow laugh. You have no idea, Evelyn. Gregory and Olivia, yes, they were part of it, but they were just players in a much bigger game. Your father got involved with people he couldn't escape from. When he tried to back out, well, let's just say that things don't end well for people who try to walk away from that kind of power. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Who are you talking about? She demanded. What power? What are you hiding? Aldrich's eyes flickered to the door, and for a split second Evelyn thought he might call for security, that he might throw her out. But instead he leaned back in his chair, a resigned look crossing his face. You're asking about things that no one should ask about, Evelyn, he said quietly, his voice heavy with an unspoken weight. But fine, if you really want to. No, I'll tell you. Evelyn didn't blink. She couldn't afford to look away now. She was on the precipice of the truth, and she needed to hear every word. A few years ago, Aldrich began, his voice steady but tinged with regret, your father got involved with a group of international financiers, people who control a lot more than just money, people who control governments, who pull strings in every corner of the world. I was just a small part of it. But your father, he wasn't meant to get involved. He was supposed to stay in the shadows, keep his hands clean, but greed got the best of him and he started digging too deep. Evelyn's pulse quickened as she listened, trying to absorb every word. What do you mean digging too deep? What was he looking for? Aldrich sighed, deeply. Your father found out something that could have taken down the entire operation, something that would have exposed everyone involved. But when he threatened to go public, that's when the group decided he had to be eliminated. Her father hadn't just died by accident. It wasn't just some heart attack. They had him killed. Evelyn's stomach twisted violently, but she pushed the nausea down, forcing herself to stay focused. Who are these people? Who killed my father? Aldrich looked at her with a mixture of pity and regret. I can't tell you their names, not because I don't want to, but because you wouldn't survive knowing. These are the kinds of people who can make anyone disappear without leaving a trace. Your father knew it, and that's why he tried to pull away. But it was too late. Evelyn's mind raced. So Olivia and Gregory, they're just pawns in this? Yes, Aldrich replied, his voice suddenly sharp. Gregory Hale might be good at manipulating the weak, but he's not the mastermind. Olivia. She's much more dangerous than you think. She's been playing both sides for years, pretending to be your father's wife, all while keeping her own interests at the forefront. She knew exactly what she was doing. Evelyn could hardly breathe, her world crumbling around her. Olivia, the woman who had been so cold, so detached, but who she had thought of as her mother for so long, was Just as guilty as Gregory, maybe even worse. She had been in on it from the beginning. Aldrich leaned forward, his voice lowering. If you keep digging, Evelyn, you'll find things you can't unsee. You'll discover more about your father's death, but it'll cost you more than you're willing to give. The people behind all of this, they'll come after you next. I'm not scared of them, Evelyn snapped, her eyes flashing with resolve. I'm not going to let them get away with it. You killed my father, and I'll make sure the world knows what you did. Aldrich's gaze hardened, his voice cold. You think you can expose us? You think you can bring down something this big? You have no idea what you're getting into. I don't care, Evelyn shot back. You've taken everything from me, and I'll make sure the world knows exactly who you are. All of you. Aldrich studied her for a moment, his lips curling into a tight smile. You're brave, Evelyn, I'll give you that. But remember this. No one gets away from this game, not even you. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Leave. Now, you've been warned. Evelyn stood as well, her hands clenched into fists. I'm not afraid of you, Aldrich. You may have won the battle, but the war is just beginning. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the office, her mind spinning with everything. Aldrich had said. The web of lies, the dark powers at play, it was all bigger than she had imagined. But no matter the cost, Evelyn knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to stop. Not now. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. The weight of Aldrich Stone's words hung over her like a suffocating fog. These are the kinds of people who can make anyone disappear without leaving a trace. She had always known there were shadows behind the wealth and power her father had accumulated, but hearing it so bluntly, it made everything so real. The danger, the risks, the power that she was now up against. It was all more than she had ever imagined. Her father hadn't just died from a heart attack as everyone had assumed. He had been silenced, killed for knowing too much. And the people who had done it, Aldrich Stone, Gregory Hale, Olivia, they were all part of something far darker than she could fathom. And they were still out there, still working behind the scenes, still hiding the truth. Evelyn's mind was racing. She couldn't back down now, she had already come too far. But what could she do? Aldrich had warned her that she was stepping into a world where no one ever left unscathed. But she had to know the truth. She had to expose them. As the sun began to rise, casting its light through the blinds of her apartment, Evelyn knew she couldn't face this alone. She needed allies. Nathaniel had already helped her, but it wasn't enough. She needed someone who knew how to dig deeper, someone who had the resources to go up against people like Gregory and Aldrich. That's when she remembered Lena. Lena, the kind woman who had offered her support from the very beginning. The woman who knew things about the world Evelyn didn't understand, but who had always been there when she needed help. Maybe Lena could help her piece together the last of the puzzle. Maybe she could connect her to someone who could help her, expose the people who had killed her father. Evelyn grabbed her coat and rushed out of the apartment, her resolve solidifying with each step. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't going to hide from the truth. She was going to fight back. When Evelyn arrived at Lena's cafe, the familiar scent of coffee and freshly baked pastries greeted her like a warm embrace. But there was no time for comfort. She walked straight to the back where Lena was sitting at her usual corner table, reading a newspaper. Lena looked up as Evelyn approached, her expression softening with recognition. But when she saw the look on Evelyn's face, the warmth quickly turned into concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost, dear," Lena said, setting the newspaper down. "What's going on? What's happened?" Evelyn sat down across from her hands trembling as she placed the files she had been carrying on the table. "I need your help, Lena. I need to know everything you know about Gregory Hale, Aldrich Stone, and Olivia." Lena's eyebrows furrowed as she picked up the papers, scanning them quickly. "Evelyn, you're in deeper than you think. These people, they're dangerous. You don't know what you're getting into." "I don't care," Evelyn replied fiercely, her eyes hardening. "They killed my father. They've been running their games for years, and now they're going to pay for it." Lena sighed deeply, her gaze falling to the papers. I've been trying to protect you from this, Evelyn. But if you're determined to keep going, you'll need someone who knows the ropes, someone who understands how deep this goes. Can't do this alone, Evelyn said, her voice cracking slightly. I need your help. I need to know how to stop them. Lena paused, her fingers tapping on the table as if debating with herself. After a long silence, she finally spoke. There's a man, someone who can help you. His name is Marcus Blackwell. He's a former investigator. He used to work for the government, but he's out now. Retired mostly, but he's still tied into some of the darker parts of the world. If anyone knows how to take down people like Gregory and Aldrich, it's him. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Where can I find him? How do I get in touch? With him? Lena pushed a piece of paper across the table with a phone number written on it. Call him, tell him I sent you. But be warned, Evelyn, he's not someone you want to cross. He's ruthless when it comes to his work. But if you're serious about exposing these people, he might be the only one who can help. Evelyn took the paper, folding it carefully and tucking it into her coat pocket. Thank you, Lena. You've done more for me than anyone else. Lena looked at her with a mixture of concern and sadness. I hope you know what you're doing. Evelyn, you're stepping into a world where people disappear without a trace. People like Gregory, like Aldrich. They don't let their secrets get exposed. Be careful. Evelyn gave her a small, reassuring smile. I don't have a choice. I have to do this for my father. As she stood up to leave, Lena's voice called out to her. Remember, Evelyn, don't trust anyone who offers help without asking for something in return. In this world, there's always a price. Evelyn nodded, but there was no hesitation in her step. She was ready. She had to be. If she was going to bring down the people responsible for her father's death, she had to confront them head on, and with Marcus Blackwell's help, she might just have a chance. Later that day, Evelyn found herself dialing the number Lena had given her, her hand trembling slightly as the phone rang. A gruff voice answered on the other end. Marcus Blackwell. Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Mr. Blackwell, my name is Evelyn Cole. Lena Matthews sent me. I need your help. There was a long pause, and then the voice on the other end of the line responded. Lena Matthews, huh? She's a good woman. But you're in over your head, kid. What do you want? Evelyn's voice was steady now, her determination clear. I need to take down Gregory Hale, Aldrich Stone, and Olivia Cole. They're responsible for my father's death, and I need to expose them. There was another pause, then a low chuckle. You've got guts, I'll give you that. All right, kid, I'll help you. But you need to understand, this is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Evelyn's heart raced, but she didn't falter. I'm ready. Evelyn spent the next few days trying to prepare herself for what was to come. Every moment felt heavy, each second spent thinking about how to bring down Gregory, Aldrich, and Olivia. She had now crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and she knew the consequences would be severe. But there was no turning back. Not now. Not when she had everything to lose. That evening, she made her way to a small, unmarked office building in a less than appealing part of town. It was the address Marcus Blackwell had given her when he'd agreed to help. It wasn't the sort of place she'd ever imagined finding someone who could help take down the powerful people behind her father's death. But then again, nothing about this situation was normal. The building looked dilapidated, with cracked windows and peeling paint. There was a door with a single light above it flickering sporadically. She hesitated for a moment, her mind swirling with uncertainty. But then she remembered her father, what he had sacrificed, what had been stolen from him, and she knocked on the door. It opened slowly, revealing Marcus Blackwell. He was tall, his face lined with years of experience, and his eyes, sharp, calculating, held a weight of someone who had seen too much. He stepped aside, motioning for Evelyn to enter. Lena's. Right. You've got guts, I'll give you that, Marcus said, his voice gravelly as he closed the door behind her. But you should know, this isn't something you just walk away from. Once you start this, there's no going back. You ready for that? Evelyn nodded without hesitation. I'm ready. Marcus didn't say anything at first. Instead, he led her to a small, cluttered desk where a computer sat, surrounded by piles of documents and files. His office was filled with old case files, photographs, and maps, all of which seemed to tell the story of a man who had lived in the shadows of the world. "Take a seat," Marcus said, motioning to the chair across from him. He began pulling up files on his computer, and Evelyn watched, trying to calm her racing heart. She was finally about to take the first real step in confronting the people who had destroyed her life. "You want to take down Gregory, Olivia, and Aldrich, huh?" Marcus asked, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Well, we've got a hell of a lot to work with, but let me tell you right now, you're going to need more than a couple of documents to do it. You're up against a network of people who control a lot more than just your father's money. These aren't just criminals, they're players in a much larger game." Evelyn swallowed hard, her eyes glued to the screen as Marcus brought up a file that made her blood run cold. It was a list of names, high-profile individuals, politicians, business magnates, all tied to Gregory Hale and Aldrich Stone in some way. "Do you see this?" Marcus said, pointing to the screen. "These people are untouchable. They have power, influence, and money. The kind of power that can make people disappear without anyone asking questions. You really want to take them down, you better be prepared for the fight of your life." Evelyn leaned in, her jaw tightening. "I'm not afraid of them. I need to expose them, Marcus. I need the truth to come out." Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, kid. I'll help you, but we need a plan. First, we go after Gregory Hale. He's the easiest to get to, and he's the one most likely to crack if we put enough pressure on him." "How do we get him?" Evelyn asked, her voice unwavering. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "We have to make him think he's losing control. He's always been the one pulling the strings, but he doesn't know how deep we've gotten. If we expose just enough of his network, he'll panic. He'll make a mistake." Evelyn nodded. "And when he does, we'll have him." Marcus's smile faded slightly. "That's the plan. But you need to understand something. Gregory Hale won't go down without a fight. He'll do whatever it takes to protect himself. And that means if we push too hard, too fast, we might end up as the ones on the run." Evelyn met his gaze, her resolve unshaken. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." "Good," Marcus said. "Then let's get started." The following days were a blur of planning, strategizing, and gathering intel. Marcus and Evelyn went over everything: Gregory's financial records, the shell companies, the network of people who worked for him. They compiled everything they had learned and began laying out a plan to dismantle Gregory's empire, piece by piece. The closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous things became. Gregory was no fool. As the pressure mounted, Evelyn could feel the walls closing in. She knew it was only a matter of time before he started making moves to protect himself, but she was determined to stay one step ahead. On the night they were ready to move, Marcus looked at Evelyn with a serious expression. "This is it. We go after him tonight. We can't afford to wait any longer." Evelyn nodded, her pulse quickening. "I'm ready." They spent hours outside Gregory's office building, waiting for the right moment to make their move. The plan was simple: expose his connections, leak the information they had gathered to the right people, and force him into a corner. As they waited, Evelyn couldn't help but think about the risks. What if they were caught? What if Gregory found out what they were doing? "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked quietly, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Evelyn nodded, her voice steady. "This is the only way." Marcus gave a brief nod. "All right, kid, let's do it." They approached the building with caution, slipping inside unnoticed. As they made their way through the corridors, Evelyn's mind was sharp, focused on the task at hand. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Something was about to go wrong. As they reached Gregory's office, Evelyn froze. The door was slightly ajar and the sound of voices echoed from within. She could hear Gregory's voice, low, controlled, but laced with tension. "Someone's been digging into my business," Gregory said, his voice cold. "I want them found, and I want them dealt with, now." Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. They weren't alone. Someone else knew they were here. Evelyn's breath hitched as she heard Gregory's voice inside the office. She froze in place, her heart pounding in her chest. Marcus, sensing the shift in her demeanor, motioned for her to stay quiet, his face hard with concentration. They had to be careful. They couldn't afford to make a sound, not with Gregory and who knows who else on the other side of that door. Evelyn's mind raced. How had they found out? They'd been so meticulous, so careful. Who could have tipped Gregory off? Had someone seen them coming in? Had they missed something? She clenched her fists, the cold panic creeping up her spine. She took a steadying breath, trying to focus. She couldn't afford to panic. Not now. They had come too far. They had to finish what they started. Marcus leaned closer, his voice barely. Above a whisper, "We need to move fast. He can't find out we're here." Evelyn nodded, forcing herself to think. What now? She couldn't allow Gregory to get away. Not this time. If they were going to expose him, they had to do it before. He had a chance to retaliate. "Do you have the hard drive?" she whispered urgently. Marcus pulled a small, sleek device from his jacket pocket. "Right here. I'll upload the data once we get to the server room." Evelyn's eyes darted to the door again. She could hear Gregory's voice growing clearer, his tone icy and sharp. "Find them," Gregory commanded. His voice was colder than ever, and Evelyn could almost hear the threat in every word. "I want them brought to me tonight. Do you understand?" They were coming for them. Evelyn's chest tightened, but there was no time for fear. She had to act. They needed to shut down this operation, expose everything. Gregory couldn't get away with this any longer. Marcus pulled her into the shadows, signaling for her to stay low. He took a step back, calculating their next move. They couldn't risk barging in, and they couldn't just turn around and leave. Not after everything they had risked. Suddenly the door opened, and two men stepped into the hallway. Both were large, wearing dark suits and looking like they belonged to the same world as Gregory. Dangerous, ruthless, and ready to carry out whatever orders he gave. They walked right past where Evelyn and Marcus were hiding, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Evelyn held her breath, praying they wouldn't look in their direction. The men passed, and Marcus motioned for Evelyn to follow him. They darted down the hall, moving quickly and silently. Evelyn's heart raced as she focused on keeping up, trying not to make a sound. They reached a small door marked Server Room. Marcus quickly pulled out a key card, swiping it with expert precision. The door opened with a soft click, and they slipped inside, locking it behind them. The room was cold, the hum of servers filling the space. Marcus moved to the main terminal, pulling up the system with practiced ease. Evelyn stood by the door, watching him work. Her thoughts were spinning, her emotions a mix of fear, anger, and determination. She wasn't sure how much time they had left. Gregory knew they were here now. He was going to make sure they didn't get away with it. But Evelyn couldn't stop. She couldn't let him win. "Almost done," Marcus murmured, tapping away at the keyboard. "Once this data is out, we'll have everything. All of Gregory's connections, all the illegal activities. It's all in here." Evelyn nodded, her eyes scanning the room. She couldn't stop looking over her shoulder. Her nerves were on edge. She didn't know how much time they had left before the men would come back, before Gregory would realize what they were doing. The sound of a door opening broke her concentration. Evelyn turned just in time to see a shadow move across the wall outside. They were coming. "Marcus," she whispered urgently, her voice low and panicked. "We need to go now." He didn't look up from the screen. Just a few more seconds. Evelyn's stomach dropped. The door to the server room rattled as someone tried to open it. "They're coming," she hissed, her pulse racing. "We have to leave." Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Just a minute more," he muttered, but his voice was tight. Evelyn could hear the panic creeping into his words too. "If I don't finish this upload, everything will be for nothing." The door handle jiggled again. This time, it sounded like someone was pounding on the door. "Marcus!" Evelyn urged, now fully panicked. We don't have time, they're here. With one last frantic tap on the keyboard, Marcus hit enter, and the server room flickered as the data began transferring. A green light flashed on the terminal. It's done, Marcus said, his voice relieved but still laced with urgency. He grabbed the device and shoved it into his pocket. Let's move. They darted toward the back door of the server room, but before they could reach it, the door burst open. Two of Gregory's men stood in the doorway, eyes scanning the room, locking onto them. The men didn't even hesitate, drawing their weapons almost instinctively. Get down, Marcus shouted, pushing Evelyn to the ground as gunshots rang out. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she hit the floor, covering her head. She could hear the footsteps of the men approaching, their shoes slapping against the cold concrete. We've got them. One of the men's voices rang out, and Evelyn could hear the smile in his voice. Gregory's going to have fun with these two. Evelyn's mind was racing. No, she couldn't let them take her. Not now. Marcus was already on his feet, grabbing a nearby chair and hurling it toward the door. The impact sent one of the men crashing backward, momentarily disorienting him. It was all the opening they needed. Run, Marcus shouted. Evelyn scrambled to her feet and dashed toward the back exit, the sound of gunshots echoing in her ears as she ran. Marcus followed closely behind, and the two of them tore down the hallway, heartbeats thundering in their chests. They made it out into the alleyway behind the building, gasping for breath. Evelyn's legs burned, and her chest ached from the rush of adrenaline, but she didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. Come on, Marcus urged, his voice tight with urgency. We have to go. They'll be on us in seconds. Evelyn nodded, forcing her legs to move even faster, adrenaline pumping through her veins. They weren't out of danger yet, not by a long shot, but at least they had the data now. At least they had something. As they disappeared into the night, Evelyn's thoughts were already on the next step. She knew one thing for sure. They couldn't stop now. The war had only just begun. Evelyn's heart raced as she and Marcus sprinted through the shadowed alley, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the brick walls. The adrenaline coursing through her veins drowned out everything else. Her mind was consumed with one thought. Keep moving. If they stopped, even for a second, it could all be over. They reached the street corner and Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her down an unmarked side street. We need to get to a safe place fast, he said, his voice low but urgent. Evelyn's breath came in ragged gasps as she glanced behind them, half expecting to see Gregory's men chasing after them. She could hear the distant sound of car, engines, the faint screech of tires as someone sped away. Her pulse spiked as her mind raced with every possible scenario, every threat. They had barely escaped, but now the danger had only intensified. What now? She asked, her voice barely audible, but the fear still evident in her words. How do we get away from them? How do we make sure this data doesn't just disappear? Marcus stopped, turning to face her. We don't let it disappear, he said with a grim determination. We go public. We get this data in the hands of the right people. It's the only way we'll make sure they don't erase it. Evelyn's thoughts were swirling. They had the evidence now, everything they needed to expose Gregory, Aldrich, and Olivia. But could they trust the authorities? Could they even trust the people who should have been working to protect them? The answer was clear. We have to be careful, Evelyn said, her voice steadying. I don't trust anyone right now. We can't just walk into a police station and hand this over. I agree, Marcus replied. That's why we need to find someone who's been on the inside. Someone who can help us get this to the right people without tipping off Gregory or anyone else in his circle. Who do we trust, though? Evelyn asked, her voice filled with doubt. How do we know they won't betray us too? Marcus's eyes softened for a moment. We do what we've been doing all along. We trust our instincts. But right now, we need to lay low. We can't risk going public too quickly. We need a plan. Evelyn nodded. She had known from the beginning that this was going to be dangerous, but she had never fully understood what it would cost. The weight of the situation was heavier now than it had ever been. She wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. She was fighting for her life. That night, after hours of hiding in an old nondescript hotel room Marcus had secured, Evelyn barely slept. Her mind raced, replaying the events of the day, the way things had gone from a slow-burning investigation to full-blown danger in the blink of an eye. She had no idea how far Gregory's reach went or who else might be involved, but she was more certain than ever that she couldn't back down. At dawn, Marcus knocked on her door, his expression grim. "Time to move," he said. "We've got to get to the server we've got access to. We need to secure it. If we can't get this out, Gregory will find a way to wipe it." Evelyn stood, her muscles stiff from the tension of the last few days, but her mind was clear. She had to act. They had come this far. She wouldn't stop now. They left the hotel and moved under the cover of daylight, trying to blend in with the crowd. But every corner they turned, Evelyn's nerves screamed that they weren't alone. She kept her eyes scanning the street, looking for anyone who might be following them. She could almost feel Gregory's men lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. They arrived at an old office building Marcus had rented in a quiet part of the city. Inside, it was sparsely furnished, but the technology was top-notch. It was a temporary setup, but it was secure. Marcus immediately began pulling up the data from the hard drive they'd taken from Gregory's office. Evelyn paced, her eyes flicking, nervously to the windows. "How long until we can get this out?" Marcus's fingers danced over the keyboard as he worked. "I'm encrypting it now. I've got a contact who can help us send it to the right place. It'll be secure, but we have to be patient. We can't risk making any mistakes." "I'm done with waiting," Evelyn said, her voice sharp. "We've been patient long enough. If we wait too long, they'll figure out what we're doing. We need to move before they come after us again." Marcus shot her a look. "Evelyn, if we rush this, we're just going to walk right into their trap. I know you're desperate for answers, but we have to be smart about this. If we get caught, now, everything we've done will be for nothing." Evelyn clenched her fists, frustration boiling inside her. She had waited too long. She had lost too much. Her father's death, the betrayal by Olivia, the power Gregory had over everything. She couldn't wait anymore. She wouldn't. She stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Marcus. "If we don't move soon, we're dead. They won't let us walk away from this. They'll come for us the moment they know we've got the evidence." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but we're doing this my way. No more reckless moves." Evelyn nodded, though her thoughts were already on the next step. There was no more time to waste. Gregory and his people would stop at nothing to silence her, but Evelyn wasn't going to let them. As Marcus sent the files, Evelyn's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her heart dropping into her stomach when she saw the message. "We know what you're doing. You're running out of time." She showed the phone to Marcus, her voice shaking with realization. They know. They know we're getting close." The game had changed. The clock was ticking, and now it wasn't just the truth they were fighting. It was their lives. Evelyn's heart raced as she stared at the message on her phone. "We know what you're doing. You're running out of time." The words were simple, but the weight they carried was enough to freeze her blood. She glanced at Marcus, who was already typing frantically on his laptop, his fingers moving with the precision of someone who had been in situations like this before. "They know, Marcus," Evelyn said, her voice strained. "They know we're trying to expose them." Marcus didn't look up, but his jaw tightened. "Of course they know. We've been digging into their dirty little secrets for too long. They're not idiots." He paused, his expression turning hard. "Now we need to move fast. This just went from dangerous to lethal." Evelyn felt a cold chill settle in her stomach, but there was no room for fear. They had the evidence. They had the power to bring down Gregory, Aldrich, and Olivia. But now the stakes were higher than ever. If they didn't act fast, everything they'd worked for could be lost. Marcus pushed a button on his laptop, and the screen flashed with the encrypted data they had gathered. "I'm sending it to the only contact I trust. Once it's out there, they won't be able to erase it." Evelyn nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She was already thinking 3 steps ahead, trying to calculate their next move. They had to Get out of the building before Gregory's men found them. But how? They couldn't just leave through the front door. No, they needed a plan. We need to get this to the press, she said suddenly, her voice filled with urgency. We need to make sure the world knows about them. We can't let them silence us. Marcus glanced up, his expression unreadable. You want to go public with this? Are you sure about that? If we go to the press, we're putting a target on our backs. You think they'll just let us walk away after that? Evelyn's chest tightened, but she didn't hesitate. I'm not walking away. They killed my father. They've done far worse, and I'm not going to let them get away with it. We go public and we make sure they can't hide. This ends now. Marcus met her gaze, his eyes steely with resolve. All right, we do this your way, but we need to move. Fast. As Marcus continued his work on the laptop, Evelyn paced the small room. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, strategies, escapes, ways to make sure the data made it to the press without getting intercepted. But in the back of her mind, she could already feel the weight of their time running out. Suddenly there was a loud bang on the door. Evelyn froze, her heart skipping a beat. Marcus's eyes darted to the door, and without saying a word, he grabbed his phone and shoved it into his pocket. We need to go. Now. Evelyn's pulse skyrocketed. She could hear the sound of footsteps pounding outside the room. Growing closer, the men were here. They'd finally tracked them down. Marcus moved quickly, grabbing the hard drive from the desk and slipping it into his bag. He pulled Evelyn toward the back exit. They'll be looking for us, but we have one chance to get out of here clean. Stay close. Evelyn nodded, adrenaline coursing through her. She had no choice but to trust Marcus. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. They reached the back alley, and Evelyn could hear the faint hum of a car engine in the distance. She turned to Marcus. We need a way out, fast. They're going to have the whole city on lockdown by now. Marcus scanned the alley, his eyes searching for any sign of escape. There's an old storage unit down the street. I know a guy. There. If we can make it there, we'll have a place to hide until we figure out the next move. Without another word, they sprinted down the narrow alley, keeping to the shadows. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, and Evelyn could feel the pressure building. They were running out of time. They couldn't afford to get caught now. They reached the storage unit in record time, and Marcus led her through a metal door that opened with a low groan. Inside, the room was dark and cluttered with old crates and boxes. The smell of dust and stale air filled Evelyn's nose, but she didn't care. They were safe, for now. Marcus closed the door behind them, his eyes scanning the room. He turned to Evelyn, his face grim. We've bought ourselves a little time, but not much. We need to get this data out to the press before Gregory and his people catch up with us. Evelyn nodded. We'll get it out. We'll make sure they can't erase it. But we need to move fast. Marcus set down the bag with the hard drive and pulled out his phone. He quickly tapped a few buttons and handed it to Evelyn. I've got a contact in the press. She'll take the data and get it out there. But you need to be ready. Once it's public, there's no going back. Gregory will come after us with everything he has. Evelyn took the phone, her hands shaking slightly. But she didn't hesitate. She couldn't. This was it. This was the moment they had been fighting for. She sent the data to Marcus's contact with a few quick taps, her heart pounding in her chest. When the message was sent, she let out a slow breath. The world would know the truth now. The world would know who Gregory Hale really was, who Aldrich Stone was, who Olivia had been all along. But even as she stood there, relief flooding her veins, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The phone buzzed in her hand and she glanced down. It was a text from the press contact. It's done, it's out, stay safe. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the weight of what they had just done. The data was out. The truth was out. They had won. Or so she thought. A loud crash sounded from outside the storage unit, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps growing closer. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. They know, she whispered. They've found us. Marcus's face darkened. We need to move. Now. Evelyn's eyes widened as she heard the unmistakable sound of voices approaching the unit. Gregory's. Men were here. They were coming for them, and this time there would be no escape. The sound of footsteps in the alley grew louder, more urgent. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced around the storage unit. The door behind them wasn't going to hold for much longer. She could feel it. Time was running out. Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her towards a side door she hadn't noticed before. "Quick, this way," he urged, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "Stay close, don't make a sound." Evelyn didn't need to be told twice. She followed Marcus, her body tense, every nerve alert. The sound of boots echoed down the hallway outside, and Evelyn knew they had mere seconds before the men would be upon them. They pushed through the back door of the unit into a narrow, dimly lit hallway that led to another exit. Marcus glanced back over his shoulder. "This leads to the maintenance room in the building next door. We should be able to slip out unnoticed if we're lucky." Evelyn nodded, adrenaline pumping through her veins. But as they reached the end of the hallway, she could hear voices approaching from the other side of the maintenance room door. Her stomach dropped. There was no way they'd make it out through there. They'd be trapped. Marcus didn't pause. He shoved open the door with a quiet force, and they entered the maintenance room. The harsh fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow. Marcus led her toward a small window at the far end of the room. They had to move fast. There wasn't much time. Evelyn's mind was racing. They were running out of options, and the risk of getting caught was growing with each passing second. She could hear them now, voices growing closer, more distinct. They had found the storage unit and were closing in. Marcus approached the window and tugged at the frame. It didn't budge. "Help me," he said, gritting his teeth. "This thing's old." Evelyn quickly joined him, using all her strength to pry the window open. It was stiff, rusted, but it finally gave way with a creak of protest. "Go!" Marcus hissed, climbing through the window into the alley outside. Evelyn followed immediately, her body slamming against the rough brick wall as she scrambled out. Her feet hit the ground hard and she winced, but there was no time to check for injuries. They were on the run and every moment counted. "Stay low," Marcus whispered, his voice tight. "We're almost there." They crouched together, moving stealthily through the shadows. The alley was dark, but the sounds of the men chasing them were unmistakable. The crunch of gravel underfoot, the snap of branches, the voices calling out as they searched. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as they turned the corner. They had reached the main road. They weren't safe yet. Marcus scanned the area, his eyes sharp. He was calculating their next move, thinking ahead, looking for their escape route. "We'll take a car," Marcus said under his breath. "There's a rental lot nearby. We can get a car and get out of here. We have to get out of the city." Evelyn didn't hesitate. She didn't even speak. The panic rising in her chest was quelled by Marcus's calm authority. They needed to move quickly, or they'd be cornered. There was a moment where everything slowed down in her mind, like time had stretched itself thin and the world held its breath. She wasn't going to let them win. Not after everything. They reached the rental lot in a few minutes, and Marcus immediately scanned the cars parked outside. He grabbed the keys to an old sedan, one that would blend in with the others. "Get in," he said, his voice low. Evelyn climbed into the passenger seat, her fingers trembling as she gripped the door handle. Marcus slid behind the wheel and started the car. He pulled out quickly, swerving onto the road and heading for the highway. But Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being watched. Her senses were on high alert, and every car that passed seemed to bring a new wave of panic. "We can't keep running," she said, her voice hoarse. "We have the evidence. We can't just leave it to chance." Marcus glanced at her, his eyes focused on the road ahead. "I know, but we need time. Gregory's people are going to be watching every move we make now. We need to get to a place where we can lay low, find a way to expose them without them knowing it." Evelyn's thoughts were racing. The data, the evidence. They couldn't let it be lost. They couldn't let Gregory, Olivia, or anyone else cover it up. "I have an idea," she said, her mind clicking into place. "I know someone who can help us. Someone who's got the right connections." We'll go to them. They'll know what to do with the data. Marcus's brow furrowed. Who? Evelyn's eyes narrowed. I'm not sure we can trust anyone else right now, but I know this person. There's someone who's been against Gregory's network for years. If we get them the data, they'll make sure it reaches the right hands. Marcus didn't reply immediately, but he glanced at her and gave a curt nod. All right, let's get there first. As the miles passed, the weight of the situation began to settle over Evelyn. Every minute spent driving was another minute that Gregory's men could be closing in. She knew it was only a matter of time before they caught up to her and Marcus, before they realized what had happened. But they had to keep moving. They couldn't afford to stop. Not when they were so close to finishing this. By the time they reached their destination, a small, inconspicuous house on the outskirts of the city, it was nearly dark. Marcus parked the car down the street, making sure to stay out of sight. Wait here, he said, glancing at Evelyn. I'll check things out first. Evelyn nodded, but as he got out of the car, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. She watched as Marcus disappeared into the shadows, and for the first time in a long while, doubt crept into her mind. Was this the right move? Could they trust anyone anymore? Suddenly, Evelyn's phone buzzed in her pocket. Her heart leapt into her throat. She pulled it out, expecting another message from Marcus, but the number on the screen wasn't one she recognized. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Evelyn Cole, the voice on the other end said, low and threatening. You're running out of time. You've made a mistake. Her blood ran cold. It was Gregory, and he had found them. Evelyn's heart stopped as Gregory's voice came through the phone, cold and menacing. She gripped the phone tighter, her mind spinning with fear, but she refused to let it take control. You've made a mistake, Gregory's voice said again, each word calculated and deliberate. You think you're clever, don't you, Evelyn? But you can't run forever. Her stomach twisted. Every part of her screamed to hang up, to shut him out. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not until she had an answer. Where are you, Gregory? She asked, her voice trembling but firm. What do you want? A cold laugh echoed through the line. Oh, I think you know exactly what I want. You're trying to take everything from me. The data you have, it's not just a threat, it's a declaration of war. And I don't take kindly to those who challenge me. Evelyn's mind raced. She could hear the edge in his voice, the danger in his tone. He wasn't bluffing. He'd already made it clear that he wouldn't hesitate to do whatever it took to protect himself. And that meant they were no longer just on the run. They were in the fight of their lives. I'm not afraid of you, she said, swallowing hard. She knew it was a lie, but she had to say it. She had to make him think she was in control. You can't stop what's coming. The truth will come out. People will know what you've done. Gregory's laughter cut through the line again, cruel and mocking. Oh, Evelyn, you really don't get it, do you? The truth means nothing. When you're already buried. And as for you and your little friend, well, you're both running out of time. Before she could respond, the line went dead. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she stared at the phone in her hand. Her mind was racing. This is it. This was the moment they'd been running from. But she couldn't just wait around for Gregory to make the next move. She couldn't afford to sit idly by and let him have the upper hand. She quickly stuffed her phone back in her pocket and glanced around, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Marcus had gone into the house to meet their contact, but Evelyn felt a cold dread settle over her. She had no idea if Marcus was in danger right now. The odds were stacked against them, and Gregory was closing in. She needed to act, fast. Without another moment's hesitation, she stepped out of the car, locking it behind her, and began walking down the street toward the small house. The closer she got, the more she felt the weight of the decision she was about to make. This wasn't just about exposing Gregory anymore. It was about survival. She reached the house just as the door creaked open. Marcus stood in the doorway, his eyes scanning the street. Evelyn, he said quietly, his voice tense. We need to leave. Now. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She was already running toward him, her heart hammering in her chest. Gregory knows. He's coming for us, we need to move. Marcus's eyes flashed with recognition, and he quickly pulled her inside, slamming the door shut behind them. I figured as much, he muttered, his expression darkening. We don't have much time. The car's parked out front. I've already arranged for a safe house, but we have to go right now. As Marcus grabbed a small bag from a table by the door and motioned for Evelyn to follow, she could hear the faint hum of a car engine in the distance. Someone was coming. I'll drive, Marcus said, pushing the door open just a crack, peering out into the street. He didn't wait for her reply. He simply grabbed her arm and pulled her into the hallway. The seconds felt like hours. Every step she took felt like a countdown. They reached the car, and Marcus quickly unlocked the doors, ushering her in. Where are we going? Evelyn asked as Marcus slid behind the wheel, the engine roaring to life. A place where we can lay low for a while, he replied, his eyes scanning the rearview mirror. We have a contact who can help us get the data to the right people, but the most important thing now is making sure we're not followed. Evelyn nodded, but the anxiety gnawing at her insides wouldn't go away. They weren't safe yet. Not by a long shot. She could still feel the weight of Gregory's words hanging over her. You're running out of time. As Marcus maneuvered the car through the narrow streets, Evelyn looked back at the house they had just left. The small house that had been their sanctuary. Now it felt like a trap. It felt like everything had been a trap. She knew they couldn't stay there long, but where else could they go? How long could they keep running from Gregory? A few minutes. Later, Marcus made a sharp turn down a dark street. He was driving fast, but not recklessly. He was too smart for that. He knew they couldn't afford to make a mistake. We need to get the data to the authorities, Evelyn said, her voice tight. This has gone too far. People need to know what Gregory and Aldrich are involved in. They can't hide anymore. Marcus glanced at her, his eyes hard. You're right. But we're going to need backup to get this out safely. If we go to the wrong people, it could all fall apart. We need to get it into the hands of someone trustworthy, someone who can expose them without getting caught. Evelyn nodded, her mind already working through the possibilities. Who could they trust? They were surrounded by lies, by people who had their own agendas, their own dark connections. But if they didn't move quickly, they might lose everything. Suddenly, a thought struck her. What about Lena? She asked. She might know someone. She's been helping us all along. Maybe she has the right connections. Marcus's eyes flicked to her, his expression thoughtful. It's a risk, but it's the only chance we've got. Evelyn grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed Lena's number. It rang for a few moments before Lena's familiar voice came. Through, Evelyn, what's going on? Lena asked, her voice filled with concern. Lena, we need your help, Evelyn said quickly. Gregory knows we have the data. We're on the run. Can you get us in touch with someone who can get this information out to the right people? Someone who can expose Gregory and Aldrich without them getting to them first. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Lena's voice came back, quieter now. I know someone. I'll set it up. But you need to stay off the radar. Evelyn, Gregory's going to be looking for you, and I don't know how much time we have. We'll be careful, Evelyn said, her heart pounding in her chest. But we don't have much time. Evelyn's grip on the phone tightened as she listened. To Lena's voice, the weight of the situation heavy in the air between them. Time was running out, and the stakes had never been higher. If they failed now, everything they had fought for would be buried forever. Lena's voice broke through the tension. You need to meet me at the old warehouse near the docks. It's off. The grid, no one will be able to trace you there. I'll arrange everything, but you need to hurry. Gregory won't waste time finding you. The moment the call ended, Evelyn looked at Marcus, who had been silently driving as they discussed their next move. Lena's setting up a contact for us. We have to go to the docks. It's the only chance we have to get the data in the right hands. Marcus nodded without a word, but his jaw tightened. His mind was already working through the plan. We'll get there. But we need to keep our distance. We can't afford to be followed. Not now. Evelyn turned her eyes toward the rearview mirror, her anxiety mounting. Every corner they turned, every shadow, felt like someone was watching them. Gregory's reach was far and wide, and now that they knew what they were doing, he would stop at nothing to prevent them from exposing the truth. The streets blurred as they sped through the city, trying to make it to the warehouse without drawing attention. Marcus didn't take any risks, but Evelyn knew they were running on borrowed time. If they were even a minute too late, it could all be over. After a tense silence that seemed to stretch for hours, Marcus finally broke it. We're almost there. We need to stay alert. I don't like this. Something doesn't feel right. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She knew what he meant. The closer they got to the docks, the more she could feel it. The trap was closing in. She clenched her fists, determined to see this through. It's too late to turn back now. The car made a sharp turn down a narrow alley, and as they approached the warehouse, Evelyn's gut twisted. There were no signs of life. It was too quiet. Too empty. Marcus parked the car behind the warehouse, and they both got out cautiously. As they approached the door, Evelyn's senses were on high alert. Something wasn't right. Her instincts screamed at her to turn around, but there was no time to second-guess now. They reached the door, and Marcus knocked 3 times in quick succession. The heavy door creaked open, revealing Lena standing in the dim light. Her eyes flickered with concern as she glanced quickly over her shoulder before letting them in. "Quickly," Lena whispered, pulling them inside. "I've arranged for the data to go to the right people. They'll get it out to the press, but you two need to stay hidden until the storm passes. I don't know how much time we have before Gregory catches on." Evelyn nodded, her stomach twisting. "Thank you, Lena. You've done more for us than anyone else. We couldn't have done this without you." Lena's face softened, but the worry in her eyes never faded. "I only wish I could do more. But be careful, Evelyn. Gregory has resources everywhere. If he finds out you're here, he'll come for you without hesitation. This isn't just about you anymore." Before Evelyn could respond, a sharp sound echoed from the outside. A car engine revving, tires screeching against the pavement. Her blood ran cold. It was the unmistakable sound of Gregory's men. "They're here," Marcus muttered, his voice tight. "We need to move now." The urgency in his voice sent a rush of adrenaline through Evelyn's body. They couldn't stay here. Not now, not with everything they had fought for on the line. Evelyn's mind raced. She didn't know what had happened, but the fear in Lena's eyes told her everything. They were no longer safe. Gregory's men had tracked them here, and it was a matter of seconds before they'd breached the door. Lena grabbed a bag from the corner of the room and thrust it into Evelyn's hands. "Take this. There's a back exit. It leads to the docks. Go down the alley and don't stop. We'll cover you." Marcus reached into his jacket, his hand brushing the gun he had stashed. "There. We're not leaving without you," he said, his voice low and filled with resolve. Lena shook her head, stepping back toward the door. "I can't go with you. If they catch me, it's over. You have to leave. Get to safety. You still have a chance." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She had always known that Lena was involved in the fight against Gregory, but hearing her so determined to stay behind hit her harder than she expected. "No, Lena," Evelyn said fiercely, grabbing her arm. "We don't leave anyone behind, not like this." Lena looked at her, a flicker of something, fear, maybe, or sadness, passing through her eyes. "There's no time to argue. You have to trust me, just go." Evelyn hesitated, but the sound of boots pounding against the warehouse floor was growing louder. There was no more time for discussion. "Go!" Lena hissed, shoving them both toward the back exit. "Now!" Reluctantly, Evelyn followed Marcus through the door, her heart aching with the fear of leaving Lena behind. But they had no choice, as they sprinted down the alley, their footsteps echoing in the quiet night. Evelyn's mind was on the brink of breaking. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It wasn't just about getting the data out. It was about stopping Gregory, stopping everything he had built from destroying everything good in the world. And that meant she had to keep fighting. But as they neared the docks, a loud crash echoed behind them. It was too late. Gregory had found them. The night air felt thick, oppressive as Evelyn and Marcus sprinted toward the docks. The crunch of their footsteps on the gravel seemed deafening against the silence that surrounded them. Every shadow, every slight movement. In the corner of her vision made Evelyn's heart race faster. She kept her focus ahead, her mind reeling from the chaos, but also determined to finish what they had started. Suddenly, the sound of tires screeching to a halt echoed behind them. Evelyn turned her head instinctively, her heart hammering in her chest. "We're not going to make it," Marcus shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. They were closing in fast. From the corner of her eye, Evelyn saw two black SUVs pull into the alley, blocking their escape. Gregory's men were here just as they'd feared. It was a trap. No more running, no more hiding. Evelyn's mind raced for a plan, but there was only one option left. She wasn't going to let this be how it ended. "Marcus, we have to fight back." "We can't let them take us," she said, her voice steady despite the panic threatening to overtake her. Marcus was already moving, his hand going to his gun, but Evelyn grabbed his arm before he could raise it. "No, we need to get the data out. They can't stop us now." "We don't have time," Marcus replied, his face grim. "If we don't act, they'll be on us in seconds. We need to protect the data, Evelyn. We can't let them destroy it." Evelyn's thoughts were in a whirlwind. The data was the key to everything, the evidence they had worked so hard to get. But now the stakes had escalated. If they didn't act fast, it would all be lost. Her eyes darted around, looking for any escape route. But the alley was narrow. The docks were close, but Gregory's men were already blocking their path. She felt trapped. Suddenly the car doors slammed open, and a group of armed men spilled out, surrounding them in an instant. The familiar figures of Gregory's men approached with a cold, calculating expression on their faces. One of them stepped forward, his voice smooth but laced with menace. "You've come this far, but this is where it ends." Evelyn's stomach dropped. She knew it was over if they didn't act now. She couldn't let them win. She couldn't let her father's death be in vain. Marcus stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun, but he paused. He wasn't looking at the men. Instead, his gaze was locked on the one man behind them, the man who had been pulling the strings from the very beginning. Gregory Hale. The moment Evelyn laid eyes on him, everything else faded away. His smug smile, his cold demeanor. It was the face of everything she had come to despise. The man who had stolen her father's life, manipulated everyone around him, and thought he could walk away without facing the consequences. "You really thought you could expose me, didn't you?" Gregory's voice rang out, his tone dripping with disdain. "You're just a child playing in a grown-up's world. You should have stayed out of this. You've cost yourself more than you realize." Evelyn's chest tightened. The rage she'd been holding back boiled over, and she finally spoke, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "You're nothing but a coward, Gregory. You killed my father. You killed him to protect your empire, and now you'll pay for." Gregory's face twitched with irritation, but he quickly masked it with that same cold, calculating look. "You're delusional, Evelyn. Your father was a liability. He knew too much and he wasn't going to walk away from the game. But you're out of your depth. We'll see about that," Evelyn said through gritted teeth, not backing down. Suddenly, the familiar sound of a phone ringing sliced through the tension. Gregory's expression darkened as he pulled out his phone, answering it sharply. "What is it?" A moment passed before he spoke again, his tone more serious. "What do you mean it's out? Who released it?" Evelyn could see the realization hitting him like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just the data. It wasn't just about her anymore. The evidence, the truth had already been released to the public. Her heart leaped. They had done it. The data was out. The world would know. Gregory couldn't stop it. She saw the anger flash across Gregory's face. The moment of hesitation was all they needed. Marcus reacted immediately, pulling Evelyn back toward the nearby warehouse, the loud sound of his boots against the concrete masking the noise of approaching footsteps. "Move!" Marcus shouted, grabbing her hand. "This is our chance. We need to go, now!" They sprinted toward the warehouse doors, but as they reached the entrance, gunfire erupted from behind them. The bullet whizzed past Evelyn's head, narrowly missing her. "Get down!" Marcus shouted, pushing her to the ground behind the cover of an old crate. Evelyn's mind raced, her breath shallow. This was it. They were out of time. "We need to make it to the docks," Marcus said between heavy breaths, scanning the surroundings. "That's the only way out." But the gunfire kept coming, and the men were getting closer. Evelyn's mind raced. She had to think. They had come so far. They couldn't let it end like this. Her eyes landed on the crates ahead of them. They weren't much, but it was the only cover they had. She turned to Marcus, her voice shaking with urgency. "We can make it to the boat. We have to. Now!" Without waiting for a response, she took off toward the nearest dock, her heart pounding with each step. She could hear Marcus behind her, urging her on. The sounds of gunfire grew more distant, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she reached the edge of the dock. She looked up to see a boat in the distance, its engine running, ready to take them away. Evelyn's body screamed with exhaustion, but she didn't stop. They were almost there. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw them. Gregory's men. They had cornered them. They wouldn't make it out. But then a roar of engines broke through the silence. A car screeched to a halt behind them, and figures leapt out, running toward the men who had been blocking their path. It was Lena. Lena had brought reinforcements. The world tilted, and Evelyn's legs nearly gave out. They had made it. The battle had been long and brutal, but the truth had won. The truth was out, and Gregory Hale, along with all his lies, had been exposed.